The WNBA thought that handing out fines would keep Sophie Cunningham quiet, but instead of silencing her, it only lit a fire that made her louder, bolder, and more unshakable than ever before. From the moment she stepped onto the floor with Caitlin Clark, Sophie became something the league wasn't prepared for, a fearless player who refused to bite her tongue and who wasn't afraid to say the things fans had been thinking all along. While other players stayed diplomatic and the league hoped the noise around Caitlin would fade, Sophie was different. Every foul that went ignored, every shove Caitlin took without a whistle, every cheap shot that slipped by, Sophie took it personally. And the more the league tried to push her back into place, the more she doubled down. What started as a teammate standing up for her star quickly turned into a movement, one that fans rallied behind and the WNBA couldn't control. This wasn't just about basketball anymore, it was about defiance, loyalty, and one player turning into the league's worst nightmare. When Sophie Cunningham joined the Indiana Fever, it wasn't just another roster move. For fans, it felt like the missing piece finally clicked into place. The Fever already had Caitlin Clark, the most talked about name in the league. But what they didn't have was someone willing to go to battle for her. Night after night, Caitlin was hammered with elbows, shoved to the floor, and hacked without protection, while refs swallowed their whistles. The team needed a deterrent, someone who wouldn't let those cheap shots slide. Enter Sophie. From the beginning, she made it clear she wasn't just there to play basketball. She was there to bring fire, attitude, and a level of loyalty the Fever desperately needed. Fans noticed almost immediately. In interviews, Sophie didn't sugarcoat things. She called Caitlin a game changer, the true face of the WNBA, and said what so many others were too hesitant to admit. That honesty struck a chord. It showed she wasn't afraid to challenge the league's narrative, and it proved her loyalty wasn't just. Sophie had planted her flag, and from that moment on, she was all in on protecting Caitlin Clark. It didn't take long for Sophie Cunningham to show fans exactly what kind of teammate she was going to be. During a preseason matchup against the Washington Mystics, the tension boiled over. Caitlin Clark, as usual, was taking hard contact and unnecessary shoves, the kind of treatment that had already become routine in her young career. Most players might grit their teeth and move on, but Sophie, she wasn't wired that way. The moment she saw things cross the line, she stepped in without hesitation, words were exchanged, players got in each other's faces, and suddenly, everyone in the arena realized Sophie wasn't bluffing. She wasn't there to play nice, and she wasn't going to let anyone take liberties with her teammate. For the Fever, it was the first taste of a new identity. For the fans, it was confirmation that Sophie was more than talk, she was action. That moment may not have made headlines, but it was the spark that showed Cunningham was willing to draw a line in the sand. And as fierce as that was, it was just a preview of the storm that was coming. The moment that truly changed everything came during the Commissioner's Cup game against the Connecticut Sun. By now, fans were used to seeing Caitlin Clark get hammered without protection, but this night was different. The Sun's defense targeted her with elbows, grabs, and shoves, and the whistles still stayed silent. Sophie Cunningham had been watching it all game, and finally she snapped when another cheap shot was thrown Caitlin's way. Sophie stormed in and made it clear she wasn't going to let it slide. A shove here, a headlock there, and suddenly the game spiraled into chaos. The crowd erupted, the clips went viral, and Sophie's reputation shifted overnight. No longer just a fiery role player, she was now seen as the league's enforcer, the one teammate who would go further than anyone else to protect Caitlin. It was the breaking point, not just for Sophie, but for the league too. In that moment, she became more than a basketball player. She became the villain the WNBA didn't know how to handle, and the protector Caitlin desperately needed. The chaos from that Commissioner's Cup clash didn't just stay on the court, it spilled everywhere. Almost instantly, Sophie Cunningham's name was trending. Clips of her shoving and locking up opponents spread like wildfire, with fans cutting highlight reels and flooding social media with support. Her jersey sales shot up, TikTok edits went viral, and for the first time, the Fever had more than just Caitlin drawing headlines. But while the fans were eating it up, the league and the media weren't celebrating. Critics labeled her dirty, the WNBA slapped her with fines, and petitions even popped up demanding harsher punishment. But instead of apologizing or dialing it back, Sophie leaned into it. She didn't flinch, didn't fold, and definitely didn't soften her approach. And that refusal to back down only made her bigger. The league tried to cast her as a villain, but to fans, Sophie was becoming a hero, the only player unafraid to fight back against the system and stand shoulder to shoulder with Caitlin Clark. The fallout was clear. Cunningham was no longer just another player. She was now a movement the WNBA couldn't control. For most players, getting fined is enough to scare them straight. It's the league's way of warning, tone it down, or you'll pay the price. But for Sophie Cunningham, each fine only fueled her more. Instead of backing down, she grew bolder, sharper, and more determined to be heard. The true turning point came when Sophie realized she didn't need to rely on the media to tell her story. She could tell it herself. That's when she launched her podcast, and fans quickly discovered the unfiltered version of Sophie. No soundbites, no watered-down answers, just honesty. She called out referees for swallowing whistles, blasted opponents for their cheap shots, and wasn't afraid to challenge the league's double standards. One of her strongest takes came when she compared Caitlin Clark's rough treatment to Paige Buecher's, pointing out how one star was shielded while the other was left unprotected. Fans loved it. They finally had a player who said what they'd been shouting at their screens all season. Sophie wasn't just another athlete. She was becoming a voice. The more Sophie spoke out, the heavier the consequences became. What started as a small fine for an in-game shove grew into penalty after penalty, with the numbers climbing each time. A few $100s turned into well over $1,000, and the message from the league was clear: stop talking, stop pushing back, or keep paying. But Sophie didn't stop. That defiance created a ripple effect, not just with the WNBA, but with the media and even some former teammates. Reporters labeled her reckless, rival players called her dirty, and critics claimed she was dragging the league's image down. And then came the toughest blow, an injury that took her off the court, leaving her unable to back up her words with game-time fire. For many players, that would have been the end of their momentum. But for Sophie, it was the opposite. Her time sidelined only made her platform bigger. She couldn't play, but she could still speak, and fans kept listening. Each new episode, each new clip, made her harder to ignore. The league had tried to punish her into silence, but all they really did was give her a bigger spotlight. By now, it was clear Sophie Cunningham had become something the WNBA wasn't prepared to handle. She wasn't the league's biggest star, but she was its loudest voice, and more importantly, she was saying exactly what fans had been thinking for months. Every time Caitlin Clark got shoved to the floor without a whistle, Sophie spoke up. Every time the league tried to spin the narrative, Sophie cut through the noise. She wasn't just protecting her teammate anymore, she was holding up a mirror to the WNBA itself. Fans saw her as the rare player who refused to toe the company line. Someone willing to risk money, reputation, and even her own standing in the league to call out what others stayed quiet about. That made her dangerous. Because once fans rally behind someone like that, they don't let go easily. Sophie became proof that the league couldn't control the conversation anymore. What started as loyalty to Caitlin had turned into something bigger, a movement for accountability, toughness, and honesty in a league that often tried to hide from all three. In the end, the WNBA's plan completely backfired. The fines, the criticism, the labels, none of it shut Sophie Cunningham down. If anything, it gave her a platform bigger than she ever would have had otherwise. Instead of becoming quieter, she became louder. Instead of backing off, she leaned in. And instead of being just another player in the league, she became the one voice fans could count on to say what needed to be said. From standing up for Caitlin Clark on the court to calling out hypocrisy off it, Sophie carved out an identity the WNBA couldn't control: unapologetic, loyal, and fearless. That's why fans love her. Because when everyone else stayed silent, she spoke. And if she could shake the league this much in just one season, imagine what happens when she comes back healthy, ready to play, and still just as unfiltered. The WNBA wanted Sophie Cunningham to fade into the background, but instead, they created the one thing they feared most: a player the fans won't stop listening to.